But yes, happy to have 30 minutes here to talk about what what Estonia's status is today, because very surprisingly, I don't know if I should have been surprised, but seeing Estonia name dropped in almost every single presentation here today is flattering, of course, and a little scary as well, of course. Having to kind of be the role model for many other nations and many of these kind of I guess success stories. And I'm not here today to give you a perfect picture. Rather, what I'm trying to do is give a realistic picture. So I will run through some slides. They're mostly empty. There's very few words on them, but I will stay on the more human side of things. And after we're done, if you have technical questions about any of it, and then please do ask. And for our participants over at Zoom as well, or on Zoom as well, I will most likely not see your questions. Text me, use LinkedIn, or write an email. I'm very sorry in advance. But I feel like in order to understand what it is that we do today, or where we are with the state of things, it's easy to kind of say that, well, Estonia, of course, a small country gets things done quickly, but it's also important to understand why. Why did Estonia come out as a digital kind of pioneer, whereas the other Baltic states, Finland, and our other neighbors have perhaps not done quite the same or done quite as well, even though they are now catching up as well. Well, firstly, it's important to understand that Estonia, the national identity is very closely tied to always making something out of nothing. We're very used to being crafty, clever, and using as little as possible. And there's a very kind of, I guess, provincial saying, or a very interesting saying, that we use the whole fish when we cook. Everything from the eyes to the tail to the fins has to be used. And when it comes to digitalization and where we are today, that is even more important than it ever has been. Because if we look at what Estonia does with data, we we have two of our foundational kind of principles, which are the once only principle and the principle that every single Estonian is the quote unquote owner of their data. As the professor put it before we went on break as well, it is my data, and I want to know what anyone does with it, the government included. So those two characteristics play into our service design very heavily. That every single piece of data, from my birthday to my address to my marital status, exists only once in the eyes of the government. Now, of course, if I go ahead and enter my data into a Facebook or Instagram registration page, if I'm logging into a third party service, then I'm willingly giving them my data. But de facto, in Estonia, at least in front of or in the eyes of the government, you have only one single source of truth for every single piece of data. And it's verifiable because of the unmutable logs. So if perhaps you've heard about the kind of blockchain inspired digital systems in Estonia, then the one aspect to kind of note here is the timestamping tool. Basically, the main tool for verifying from my standpoint, from the human standpoint, or from the citizen standpoint, is the data tracker. And the data tracker was built because, in addition to being resourceful, Estonians are also perhaps one of the unhappiest nations in the world. Uh, I mean this, of course, in the best way possible, meaning that Estonians have always had this discontent streak. We've seen that this is one of the driving forces behind digitalization. We are a nation of people who cannot sit still. Whether you want to look at the startup numbers, whether you want to look at the simple number of businesses in Estonia, in a country of 600,000 taxpayers, we have around 200,000 companies. So anyone and everyone has a side hustle. You have to do something on the side because, well, what else are you going to do? It's cold, dark, and rainy for 9 months out of the year. So got to find something. But that same sense of discontentment has also been brewed or kind of planted into every single one of us when it comes to the government. And here is where I'll perhaps disagree for the first time with Professor Buchanan as well, saying that Estonians trust the government. We absolutely do not. We have never trusted the government, but we keep badgering them for explanations. And this trust that, well, is earned by the government does not come from a place of simple understanding or simply, a patriotic sense of entitlement. Rather, it comes from a nation of smart people. And this room and our Zoom participants as well know that smart people are very incredibly annoying to deal with because smart people ask questions and they require explanations. And in making sure that our citizens are curious and that they ask the question why, we've come to a place today where, if during the panel before, the kind of idea of having to actually listen, the state having to actually listen to its people came up, then, well, for Estonia, this is the reason why. Because we expect you to be critical. We've trained our citizens, our students, from very early days to be critical. We want you to criticize and we want you to give us feedback because at least we know you're paying attention. If we saw that our people stopped caring, if we saw that they started to simply trust the process because, well, it's there, it works, and it's quick, we would be worried. For example, the most criticized system or the most criticized service in Estonia, without a shadow of a doubt, has been in use for 20 years already. It's the iVoting system. We've been using internet voting for our parliamentary, local, and European elections for 20 years. In the year 2005, we implemented it. And of course, it's polarizing because it's political. But at the same time, all of those polarizing opinions have brought in some of the brightest and best minds in cybersecurity and some of the best penetration testers as well to find the weaknesses in the system. And does anyone know what the biggest threat is to our digital systems? It's sitting, as always, between the device and the chair. It's you, the person sitting behind you, you yourself. We always see that humans are and always will be the biggest threat in terms of cyber. It's us who are, if we look at what attacks are occurring most often, they're phishing attacks because they're playing to human inattentiveness. A moment of weakness, even in the smartest person, will get you caught. You will accidentally click a PDF that you were not supposed to click. But the best thing that we can do is at least educate you. Try and give you all the tools possible. And at the same time, try and make sure that you pay attention, that you keep asking questions, and that you stay, for the lack of a better word, unhappy. We want you to ask questions. And we do that by, well, again, I'm being rather candid and not really sugarcoating it. But what we do is we treat our citizens like adults. We don't treat them like children and tell them that everything is okay and you have nothing to worry about. When something is wrong, we tell you exactly what happened. This, of course, is not something that we planned on doing from the beginning, but rather what happened in 2007, when Estonia was hit by one of the largest cyber attacks at that time because of a simple bronze statue that we wanted to move. You can imagine that it was a war memorial statue and that one of our neighbors was not very happy with the decision to move that statue. You can look at Google Maps and figure out which one. But what happened then? The attack itself wasn't the important part. What happened, or what the important part was what happened a few days later, when our Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, and Minister of Justice were on the morning news telling our citizens three things. They told us what had happened, which was bad, the current situation, which was even worse, and what was going to happen next, giving us a little bit of hope. Those three little things created the standard or set the bar for how communication had to be handled between the state and its citizens. This kind of brutal honesty or radical transparency became the norm, and it didn't change. People got used to it, and that was the very kind of that has become the expectation from our side. So, in a sense, yes, we like to say that we have a heart and a backbone. That we not only say that we're going to do something, but we're going to get it done, and we're going to get it done quickly. That's not just important on a national level, but on an international level as well. Because if we look at the partnerships that Estonia has formed, the reason that perhaps we are mentioned rather often when talking about digital identities as well, is because we didn't just build something in 2002 that gathered dust on the shelf for 23 years. We've been using it, we've been putting it to work, and we've been exporting those same goods. We saw that Estonia was not solving and still isn't solving unique problems. Every single country in the world hopefully wants its citizens to be happy. We can always argue about what the government actually wants, but at the end of the day, we can hope that they have our well-being at heart. So Estonia has positioned itself as a team player. And as a small country, we know exactly that the stronger your friends are, the stronger you are. So that's why when we see Estonia working with the European Commission on the EU IDAS 2 framework, when we see Estonian IT companies go abroad and do incredible things, then it doesn't come from a sense of entitlement. Rather, it comes from a sense of getting things done. As I said, we're not ones to sit around and just wait for things to happen. And we've luckily got some numbers to prove it as well. Whether you want to do business with us, whether you're looking at us as a democracy, or as a simple place of trustworthy media, Estonia, for one reason and another, has earned people's trust, and not just our own people, but internationally as well. There's something to be trusted, and we understand that trust is not gained lightly. I won't go into it again, but we see that trust is something that you have to keep winning over and over and over again. And yes, as I'm guessing this is one of the presidents that Peter has met as well. The main man, so to say. We call this president the grandfather of digitalization, the man who brought digitalization to our shores in many senses. And yes, after we became 100% digital with our government services last year, the government gifted us the present of e-divorce for Christmas. On Christmas Day, it was launched. So, and our president said that the true achievement has not been that you can get divorced online. Not to say that we don't care. We haven't seen a major jump in numbers of divorce in the last 10 months. Rather, what has changed, or what we hope has changed through digitalization, is how people relate to each other, what they do, and how they get things done. We see that many times Estonians themselves take it for granted, take everything that we have for granted, because we oftentimes forget that things can be done in inefficient ways as well. It takes most Estonians one work trip to another country to realize just how inefficient other countries can be. And then we realize we might have it pretty good, actually. But to talk about, many of the things that have been talked about in a more kind of futuristic light, whereas Estonia has kind of not figured it out, but we've made it work. And we see that since 2002, the ID card and the electronic identity, more especially, has gathered more and more traction. We started, of course, with it being the kind of central verification tool for you to access basic services. Today, I can walk into my local overpriced coffee shop on the corner and use the same identity card that I use to travel to get a discount. And why is it possible? Well, it's been mentioned, but thanks to X-Road, because the interoperability platform that is X-Road basically provides us with immutable sources of truth. If someone needs to know something about me, they can only ask about very specific parts. The wonderful part about how we manage our private data or our citizens' data is founded on the idea that you actually don't have any business touching my data. What the X-Road allows you to do is to ask questions. Once I give you permission to access my data, you get to ask, is this person 18 years or older or not? Yes or no. Does this person have a criminal record? Yes or no. You don't need to see that criminal record. What you need is verification if I have one or not. Whether you're a bank, a school, or a government agency, everything has been legally bounded that the government organizations that don't have any business asking for specific bits of data don't actually get access to those points of data. So that even ministries who kind of not swap data, but who would need specific sets of data can only get it from one specific place. whether it's the Ministry of Interior or the Ministry of Health or Ministry of Social Affairs, we see that both of those ministries have to go to the same exact source. What it does for us, or what it has done, is also avoid a single point of failure when it comes to cybersecurity. We see that the attack in 2007 set something up for us, and we understood the importance of decentralization. We cannot have one specific entrance point to all of our data. That for that reason, using Dexroad and having decentralized all of the data that exists about every single citizen, it's wonderful because it's anonymized and completely decoupled. We've had 3 or 4 larger data incidents in the last 10, 15 years. And all of those few incidents have ended with a public response that is rather milquetoast. It's very lukewarm because people understand that what was accessed wasn't actually that special. Well, we see that these access or these attacks also target third-party providers that the government systems themselves keep holding, but the counterparts in the private sector oftentimes not fail, but rather they have some security issues. So we see that the electronic identity itself helps us today do everything and anything from my phone. Even yesterday, when arriving in Edinburgh Airport, I had to deal with a document because one of my contractors, who's reconstructing my house right now, had a document he needed to sign. Well, I got it done in 15 seconds. And that's a wonderful thing. I mentioned the economic impact, of course, and everything else. But we see that the government, at least in that, because I promised to tell you, or the actual focus of the talk was on what's next and looking at where are we going after digitalizing everything. And we see that the EU wallet itself, we figured out some parts of it, but we still have a ways to go. We don't have the best solution. We simply have a solution that works for us. I was talking over lunch that Estonia is very clever, but we are nowhere near as clever or agile as the Ukrainians. We see that their DIA app with DIA application with the Trembita infrastructure behind it is incredibly clever, and it's already doing things that the EU wishes. They can get so much done simply through an app that was built out of necessity, and we see that there's a lot of commonalities there. That Estonia has had a need for digitalization. For us, it was not a question of comfort. It was a question of, well, simple resource management. We know that we're a small country and we have few people. Even fewer of those people do qualify to be state officials. So of course, we created the digital state to save time, money, and to not force people to sit in back rooms and simply stamp documents. And in the same way, we understood that in the same way that every single one of you most likely has a smartphone in your pocket, which helps you watch videos, learn things, and listen to music, government should be exactly as close to you. You shouldn't be going around, rummaging around your state portals, trying to find the correct place to apply for a research grant. You should be able to get to that within a moment. We want everything to be as easy for you as possible. But as we are a critical people, we see that a lot of the conversations around digitalization in the last 10 years have actually started to pivot from technological conversations to more ethical and moral conversations. These topics have been covered here today as well. And we see that, with virtual assistants in the future, there's a lot that we still have to talk about. Because if I allow an agent built by the government to build or to renew my driver's license or to make doctor's appointments for me, how can I ensure that no data is being lost into third parties? And that is the hard part. Of course, we don't have the universal truth. But what we do have is a pretty good idea of what we want to do with our digital state. We see that digitalization, Dia put it beautifully during our panel, that digitalization is all about empowerment. Digitalization isn't just a tool to turn paper documents into PDFs. digitalization has always been about making sure that there's an easier, more efficient way of getting things done. And nowhere is it more important to empower people than in democratic processes. Estonians historically are incredibly bad at making our voices heard. There was the singing revolution, then we had two referendums, and we've had one strike in the last 15 years. We simply, we like to keep to ourselves. So the government had to meet us halfway as well. They built something called the Citizens Initiative portal, which allows every single citizen or every single resident, not just citizen, to draft ideas or to draft proposals for local and state governments for them to ratify them. You see that you have to gain in a very kind of Kickstarter or very crowdfunding kind of way, you have to gather a specific number of signatures, but it empowers more rural communities to get things done. You don't have to go somewhere and actually put together a document. You can do it collaboratively. People can come together in communities in the countryside or in the cities, and they can get propositions in front of the local or state governments. So we see that it's already helping places, from silly little things like naming a street that used to be named after a Soviet war hero to something more kindly, I guess. And all the way to things like banning indoor smoking. You shouldn't smoke inside. Well, sure. Let's see if that gets passed. We cannot guarantee that any of these legislative bills get passed, but at least there's conversations that are happening. We see that we have the democratic, I guess, right to complain, and we should take it very seriously. I saw someone on Zoom a few presentations ago comment that vote often and early. Yes, Estonian voters are one of the laziest in the country, or laziest in the EU. And why is it? It's because we've made iVoting something that makes people usually question our state sanity boring. Most people have fallen out of love with democratic processes because we've made it about as interesting as ordering food from Uber Eats. We see that more and more young people, for example, are voting in person on paper. They're not doing it because they don't trust the system. They're doing it because they want to feel a certain sense of progress or process. They want to feel special. They want to put on a suit and tie. They want to go out for a drink or for lunch after they voted with their friends. And we see that it's a strange thing to say that we're proud to have made something so boring that people are now turning back to physical mediums. But it's also where we want to be headed. We want to see that, or the next steps for us is looking at a personal government model that exactly in the same way as you get advertisements that are specialized or personalized to you from Google, Amazon, all the other players. We want the government to come to you and provide you with services that are exactly as personalized. Because thanks to the X-Road and thanks to the fact that every single piece of data exists once and is the most updated version of it, we know exactly what our citizens need. Now, the hard part, the difficult conversations stem around how is this data used? We don't want it to be widely spread, so we decided to rather keep it, I guess, a little reserved. Today, we see that there's some processes or some services that are already personalized. A good example here is Parenthood, who you can raise your hands or give me a quick wink or something if you're a parent in the room. Yeah, there's a good third of you at least. And over Zoom as well, I feel the hand raising, so well done. In the case of having a child or a child joining your family, I've heard that it's a wonderful moment in your life. It's also a very stressful moment in people's lives. So the last thing you should be worrying about or dealing with is a government official. And yet, for many of us, that's exactly how the process looks like. That you have to deal with paperwork, even though something absolutely wonderful just happened. Well, we've personalized it in the sense that the moment a child is born, you have 30 days to name a child, but the moment they're born, they get a personal identity code. The personal code is completely unique to them, And what it guarantees is that there's one version of your child. What it also guarantees is that there's a cascade of effects, very similar to what was talked about only moments ago with agentic kind of service providers from the state side. That the moment a child is born, he or she or they are registered to your family. This means that parental benefits start rolling in automatically. Parental leave gets calculated automatically and gets contact or your employer gets contacted about the fact that you will not be showing up to work tomorrow. We see that there's other kind of hidden or less talked about benefits down there as well. On the other side, talking about less joyous occasions, who here has ever been fired? Okay, we're doing very well. Okay, very well. But I'm guessing most of you have swapped jobs, that it's not your first, you're not enjoying your first time round in the employment system. Well, if any of you have been unemployed, it sucks. It is a truly horrendous experience. You don't know what's going to happen next. You have a mortgage, but you don't know how it's going to get paid. Well, we understand that it's a stressful period in people's lives. So when we look at unemployment as well, our unemployment insurance fund automated the whole process. The moment a person is registered as jobless, they get added to a pool of participants in an AI algorithm, which looks at the current job market, which looks at the Estonian job portals and looks for specific trainings for them, suggests them to you, and suggests specific jobs for you. It's completely up to you to apply for them, but they can also put together your CV because they can pull your educational data, they can pull your job history, and of course, they don't know your special skills or whether or not you can juggle. But what they can do is pull all the pertinent data from different databases upon consent, of course, because we see that the more personalized we start getting, the more we start worrying and kind of focusing on consent. We see that today some registries allow you to consent in and out of specific services. And as we add more of these services, as we see that next year we're planning some big things regarding buying a house and doing all these strange things, that more and more consent-based services are coming in. It's not just about transparency, but it's also about you understanding what's being done with your data. Because if the data that is processed, that is kind of forwarded then to you, is illegible by anyone except for the people in this room because you are smart enough to understand it, well, it's of no use. It needs to be clear enough so that an English major can understand it as well. But here, I did rattle on for about 15 minutes about what we are doing and what we are going to do. Now, does anyone have questions? You can shout it out. I can just say it into the mic. Oh, there's a microphone already coming your way.
On the selective disclosure piece you were talking about earlier, what was your experience in communicating that to citizens, to the English majors, to make people understand how selective disclosure works? Or did you find there was distrust in the idea that there was just a verification rather than the full information being transmitted?
No, by law, we made it so that you had to disclose anytime a private or public organization needs any kind of information that is outside of their legislative space. They need to basically write a 500-word essay on what data they need, why do they need it, and who is going to use it. We see that those three components of the verification process are very important. Not just telling you when your data was accessed, but telling you exactly when or who accessed it. So in the case of medical data, for example, we can see the name of the nurse who accessed my data, or the doctor, or the assistant, whoever, and the reason why, and for what period as well. And that is done in a very humane way. Yes.
So thank you for the presentation. It was really enlightening, and I think to me it sounded like a big MNC trying to take care of the employees and like in a good way. So the question I had was, you mentioned that, based on different life events, automatically things are happening. And that's one of the things which generally people are worried about. If the government intention is not good, they can track almost everything what you're doing. So how does citizens over there feel if somebody bad's come into power, they will not misuse the data that they have?
So we've actually kind of turned the board around on the government in a way. Because here, since the data tracker application itself, I would show you, but I'm not going to mess with this stuff here. Basically, the data tracker sounds as if it's from an episode of Black Mirror, like very, very Twin Peaksy. But in effect, what it is that it allows every single citizen to look at who has been accessing their data. So it's not a surveillance function for the government, rather it's for the citizens to look at the government and look at the corporations. Of course, this only applies to the data sets that the government has on you. So if you've given your data away to third-party suppliers with full consent of them keeping it, you can't see that. Of course, you can request data pullouts through GDPR regulations, but in general, we see that most people worry in a very limited capacity. They worry and they criticize, but we see that data privacy has always been so central to the Estonian society in general that there haven't been too many questions about it. And on the topic of politicians, that's an interesting one because we do have politicians who argue and bicker senselessly. Of course, that's their job, right? In addition to actually standing up for people's rights. But the interesting thing about digitalization has been that there hasn't been too many arguments regarding it. A very human example that I've brought here is that the first service that we digitalized was the tax return. Today, it takes about 90 seconds to 2 minutes for the average citizen to do their taxes. Now, why that service hasn't been disputed is because it does not matter if you're right-leaning, left-leaning, centrist, Green Party, Pirate Party. Your political declension does not actually change what you have to do. We see that, since Estonian tax season starts in the middle of February, no one wants to stand in a line outside in minus 25-degree weather, independent of their political leaning. And in that sense, we see that political parties do argue about, or they have had many opinions about some services. But at the end of the day, everyone's understood that digitalization is the way to go. That on a broader kind of spectrum, it makes things more efficient. It saves us money and time. And to kind of fight digitalization, at least in the Estonian context, is a sort of political suicide in some senses. Was questions? Oh.
Thanks for the presentation. It's really interesting how there's this almost like consensual and consultative approach that the government's taken to adopt any of these new technologies. That's something we do quite a lot here as well, the consultation side of it, but maybe it doesn't work as well as it does for you in terms of like responses and people being happy with the results. But I'm wondering if you have any examples of things where, you went through this process and then it was decided, actually, we don't want to adopt this thing. It's too risky, or, it doesn't benefit us enough, or it costs too much or whatever.
The state app is a wonderful example of this. This application has been bounced around in ministerial back rooms for the better part of 8 or 9 years. The initial pitch for the app was inefficient. It was incomplete, and we didn't see the benefit in it. Only a year or two ago did we start to see the actual kind of benefit behind it, because our ministry, or our digital minister or minister of digital affairs changed. And we today see that also the ministry in charge of our digital affairs changed. That up until the January of this year, digital affairs in Estonia were managed by the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications, because the focus was so heavily on exporting Estonia's ICT sector. From January 1st of this year, we switched to the Ministry of Justice, because we saw that with the implementation of, or the widespread implementation of AI and all these other technologies, we needed to update our legislative base and could be more flexible and ready for the future. I hope that answered your question. You can specify if there's something that I can get to.
Yeah, I don't know if I can formulate it, but thanks. That's interesting.
Yes. Are we good? Yes. So the question was, where do we see ourselves going in 20 years? Well, looking at the way things are going, and if it proves to be fruitful, this kind of personal government approach, then the view in 20 years hopefully is that we already have a full generation of people who have never seen the inside of a government office. That you don't have to stand in line. There's a better way to do things, that people who understand these processes, but who also get catered to in terms of the services that are provided to them. Because, in all honesty, I'm one of the nicer governmental employees. I'm pretty okay. But generally, none of us want to deal with the government. The state generally makes all of us shudder, and we try to avoid them as much as possible. So what we're trying to do is basically automate that. We're trying to make sure that you, as a citizen, get your services quickly, efficiently, and securely, while also making sure that you are involved in the process. It doesn't happen behind your back. It doesn't happen invisibly. Rather, it happens based on your consent, very similarly to the agentic approach here. So hopefully that's where we're going. Check back in 2045.
I have one last question, if that's okay. I was wondering, how is the journey for adoption across different age groups? Because something we hear here a lot is about, I don't know, the more elderly population and kind of not digital natives and how they might be excluded. How was that in Estonia?
Our elders are surprisingly digital. Of course, that has to do, a little bit of it has to do with the fact that when our digital identity was implemented, the 60-year-olds today were 35 or 36, whatever. So, we see that the older generations are very tech savvy, but that's also due to the educational programs. We launched, as soon as we started the digitalization journey in the middle of the 90s, we launched a couple of educational programs. One of them targeted young people, the other one targeted our elderly. All of them had access to free digital literacy courses through public libraries, through public schools, and the programs are still running because we understand that even in an age where every single one of us is connected to the internet through at least one device at all times, it's still a privilege. It's a privilege to have a smartphone. It's a privilege to be connected to the internet. So we've kept those knowledge centers, and we still keep training our librarians, for example, to be ICT teachers. And we see that it has paid off. But as I said before, sorry to keep hitting the wire. The bigger problem here today seems to be our young people. How do we keep them engaged? Why should the average young person care about what we're doing? Because we saw that in the 2000s, there was a lot of enthusiasm from most age groups because it was new, it was interesting, and it looked like there was a lot of potential there. Today, we have already a generation of teenagers who have always had access to things digitally. They've always done things from a screen. They have never had to deal with standing in a line. It's a wonderful thing, but it's also very classic of someone to be annoyed by teenagers. So we do see that most of our efforts today are going towards teenagers and going towards making sure that they feel included.
Rannar, last question.
Absolutely.
The EIDAS 2 regulation mandates that Estonia will implement a digital identity wallet by the end of next year.
Yep.
What are Estonia's plans there, and what benefits do you see from that architecture moving on from your kind of, I guess, early mover advantage?
Well, at this point, we hope that the advantage that we have is a consultant, a kind of consultancy role. That with Estonia moving quickly and having implemented so many of the data privacy laws as well, we're very early on. And now with the EIDAS, EU EIDAS as well, the problem has become that we're waiting for everyone else to catch up. With in the best possible way. We're waiting for the EU-wide usage because, you know, the fact that I can use my identity card or my mobile driver's license for my phone is fun in Estonia, but I don't need it that often. It would be fun to be able to travel. You know, I have a passport on my phone. There's nothing I can do with it. So if we can push through and actually get this thing moving by the end of next year, it'll be wonderful. That we can share our experience and truly, you know, once again remind people that even though we figured some stuff out early, we've gone through all of the kind of mistakes as well. We've hit every rung or like every branch on the tree while coming down.